Howdy, hello, and welcome to our podcast, episode number 82. Chan and Tucker's hilarious buddy cop adventure continues in Hong Kong. I'm Timothy, and I am here with my dear friend, Thomas. Today, we're going to talk about a film called Rush Hour 2. Rush Hour 2 is a 2001 American buddy cop action comedy film directed by Brett Ratner and written by Jeff Nathanson. The story follows Chief Inspector Lee and lab detective James Carter as they go to Hong Kong on vacation, only to be thwarted by a murder case involving two U.S. customs agents after a bombing at the American embassy. So, Tom, what do you think about Rush Hour 2?
Well, Timothy, I have to say that I quite enjoyed Rush Hour 2. It's a fun action comedy with some great chemistry between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. The film has its fair share of laugh-out-loud moments, which is always a plus for me.
Well, now, Tom, I must disagree with you on this one. While the first Rush Hour movie was decent enough, I found Rush Hour 2 to be quite lacking in substance and originality. The humor felt forced at times, and it didn't help that the plot was rather predictable.
Now, Timothy, I understand your concerns about the humor feeling forced at times, but I think that's part of what makes this movie so enjoyable. Chris Tucker's character is supposed to be over the top and outrageous, which adds an element of levity to the film. As for the plot being predictable, I think that can be said for most action comedies. The important thing is how engaging the storytelling is. And in this case, I found it quite entertaining.
Well, Tom, while you might find enjoyment in the over-the-top humor and predictable plot element, I personally prefer a bit more depth and originality in my films. The stunts also felt rather tame compared to Jackie Chan's previous works. They lacked the intricacy that made him such an iconic performer.
All right, Timothy, let's not forget that this movie was made for a wider audience than just hardcore action fans or film snobs like yourself. It was meant to be entertaining and light-hearted, which it succeeds in doing. As for the stunts being tame compared to Jackie Chan's previous work, I think that's a bit of an unfair comparison. Different films call for different approaches to stunt work, and Rush Hour 2 was clearly aiming for a more accessible experience.
Well, Tom, while I can appreciate your point of view on the matter, I still stand by my opinion that Rush Hour 2 is nowhere near as good as it could have been. But enough about our personal preferences. Let's move on to discussing some of the characters and performances in the film. What did you think of Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan's chemistry this time around?
I think their chemistry was great in Rush Hour 2, just as it was in the first film. They have a natural rapport that translates well on screen and makes for some hilarious moment. Is a bit more toned down in this sequel, which allows Jackie Chan's Inspector Lee to take more of a leading role. This change in dynamic adds an interesting layer to their partnership and keeps the audience engaged throughout the film.
But I must say that I found Tucker's character to be rather grating at times with his constant yapping and overacting. His humor just didn't land with me as well as it did in the first movie. As for Chan's performance, he still delivers some impressive stunts and physical comedy, but it feels like he's been holding back a bit to accommodate Tucker's style of humor.
That might be true, Timothy, but I think it's important to remember that this is a buddy cop comedy, and both characters need to bring something different to the table. Without Tucker's manic energy, the film would have felt much more somber and serious. And as for Chan holding back, well, he's getting older and probably needs to be more cautious with his stunt work these days.
Fair enough, Tom.
I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree on this one.
So let's move on to talking about the plot itself. What were some of your favorite moments or twists in Rush Hour 2?
Well, I enjoyed the scene where Carter and Lee infiltrate the Triad's casino and end up in a high-stakes poker game with Ricky Tan. It was a great set piece that showcased both Chan and Tucker's acting talents as well as their physicality. Another favorite moment of mine is when Carter and Lee are chasing after Tan's henchmen on motorcycles through the streets of Hong Kong. It's just pure adrenaline-fueled action that never gets old.
While I appreciate those scenes as well, I found them to be fairly standard for an action comedy like this one. My favorite part of the movie was actually when Carter and Lee go undercover at a nightclub in order to gather information about Tan's operation. The way they interact with the club patrons is quite amusing, and it leads to some interesting plot developments.
Yeah, that scene was pretty funny too. I think what makes Rush Hour 2 so enjoyable is its ability to balance comedy and action in a way that doesn't feel forced or contrived. It knows exactly what it wants to be and delivers on that promise.
But I still wish the film had taken more risks and pushed itself further in terms of originality and depth. As it stands, Rush Hour 2 is a decent enough popcorn flick, but nothing more than that for me. But with that being said, let's move on to discussing some interesting trivia about the movie. Tom, do you know any fun facts about Rush Hour 2?
What was the most expensive set ever built for the film?
Was it the casino or the American Embassy?
That's an interesting question, Timothy. According to some sources, the most expensive set ever built for Rush Hour 2 was actually not the casino or the American Embassy. It was a large street scene in Hong Kong that featured numerous shops and restaurants. This elaborate set took over 2 months to construct and cost an estimated $5 million.
Whoa, Tom, that's quite surprising. I would have thought that one of the more prominent locations like the embassy or casino would have been the most expensive to build. But I suppose when you're dealing with such a massive production budget, it doesn't matter too much where they choose to spend their money.
Moving on from there, do you know anything about any behind-the-scenes drama or conflicts during filming?
Well, Tim, as with most big-budget Hollywood productions, there were indeed some issues that came up during filming. One of the biggest challenges was finding locations that could accommodate both the American and Chinese elements of the story. This led to some logistical nightmares for the production team, especially when it came to securing permits and clearances from local authorities in Hong Kong. Additionally, there were reports of tension between Chris Tucker and Brett Ratner, the director, due to their different working styles and creative visions for the film.
That's quite interesting, Tom. I never would have guessed that securing locations would be such a big issue for a movie like Rush Hour 2. And it's sad to hear about the tension between Tucker and Ratner, but at least they were able to overcome those obstacles and deliver a decent enough film in the end. Lastly, do you know anything about any hidden Easter eggs or cameos that might have gone unnoticed by most viewers?
Yes, Timothy. There are actually quite a few hidden gems in Rush Hour 2. One of the most notable is a brief appearance by Jackie Chan's father, Charles Chan, who plays an elderly man at the airport additionally. There are several cameos from popular Hong Kong actors and actresses scattered throughout the film. Lastly, keep an eye out for a small reference to the first Rush Hour movie. In one scene, you can spot a newspaper with the headline "Hoffman's Body Found," which is a nod to the villain played by Christopher Walken in the original film.
That's quite interesting, Tom. I never would have guessed that Jackie Chan's father made an appearance in the film, let alone a cameo from some popular Hong Kong actors and actresses. It just goes to show how much thought and effort went into making Rush Hour to an authentic representation of both American and Chinese cultures. Speaking of which, do you think the film managed to balance these two elements effectively?
I think one of the strengths of Rush Hour 2 is its ability to seamlessly blend Eastern and Western sensibilities. The film successfully captures both the glitz and glamour of Hong Kong as well as the grittiness and darkness that can sometimes pervade the city's underworld. In terms of balancing humor, action, and cultural nuances, I think Brett Ratner did an admirable job with this movie.
Well, while I can appreciate your point of view on the matter, I still feel like Rush Hour 2 could have done more to push boundaries in terms of storytelling and character development. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun watch, and there are some great moments throughout the film, but at times it feels a bit too formulaic and predictable. Do you agree with that assessment?
To an extent, yes, Timothy, I can see where you're coming from. However, I think we have to remember that Rush Hour 2 was intended to be an entertaining popcorn flick rather than a gripping piece of cinema. The filmmakers knew their target audience and delivered exactly what they wanted: fast-paced action, witty humor, and some light-hearted escapism. In that regard, I think Rush Hour 2 succeeds admirably in its mission statement.
Fair enough, Tom. While I might not be as fond of the film as you are, I can appreciate its appeal to a wider audience. And with that said, let's move on to discussing some of our favorite moments from Rush Hour 2. Do you have any particular scenes or moments that stand out for you?
One of my personal favorites is the scene where Carter and Lee infiltrate the Triad Casino undercover as high rollers. The tension builds beautifully throughout this sequence, with both characters having to navigate dangerous waters while maintaining their cover identities. Additionally, I love the action set piece at the end of the film when they confront Ricky Tan on his yacht. It's just pure adrenaline-fueled entertainment.
Well, Tom, while we've been discussing our thoughts on Rush Hour 2 as a whole, let's shift our focus for a moment and talk about the actors themselves. Jackie Chan plays Inspector Lee, a role he reprised from the first film. His character is known for his acrobatic fighting style and comedic timing, which he executes flawlessly in this sequel as well. What do you think of Jackie Chan's performance in Rush Hour 2?
I have to say, Timothy, that Jackie Chan was indeed fantastic in Rush Hour 2. As you mentioned, his acrobatic fighting style and comedic timing are on point throughout the entire film. What I find particularly impressive about Jackie Chan's performance is how he seamlessly blends action with humor without coming across as forced or contrived. He makes it look effortless.
Indeed, Tom, I couldn't agree more. Now let's talk about Chris Tucker, who plays Carter. His character is known for his loud and energetic personality, which can be quite jarring at times. Some might argue that this over-the-top performance detracts from the film as a whole, but I believe it adds an interesting dynamic to their partnership. What do you think of Chris Tucker's portrayal of James Carter?
Well, Timothy, I personally love Chris Tucker's performance in Rush Hour 2. As you said, his loud and energetic persona can be quite jarring at times, but I believe that's part of what makes him so entertaining to watch. He brings a certain level of excitement and unpredictability to the film, which keeps audiences engaged throughout its runtime. Without Chris Tucker's James Carter, I don't think Rush Hour 2 would have been nearly as successful or memorable as it is today.
That's a valid point, Tom. Now let's talk about some of the other actors in Rush Hour 2. One of the standout performances for me was from Rosalind Sanchez, who played Isabella Molina Lee's love interest. Her character is strong-willed and intelligent, which serves as an interesting contrast to both Lee and Carter's more brash personalities. What did you think of her performance in the film?
I have to say, Tim, that Rosalind Sanchez was fantastic in Rush Hour 2. As you mentioned, her character Isabella Molina is a strong-willed and intelligent woman who doesn't let either Lee or Carter push her around. Her performance adds an interesting layer of depth to the film as she serves not only as a love interest for Inspector Lee, but also as someone who challenges both characters personally and professionally.
Yeah, agreed, Tom. Rosalind Sanchez did an excellent job portraying Isabella Molina. Now let's talk about one of the film's villains, Ricky Tan, played by Hector Elizondo. His character is cold, calculating, and ruthless, which makes him quite intimidating. What do you think of Hector Elizondo's performance as Ricky Tan?
I have to say, Timothy, that Hector Elizondo did an amazing job playing the role of Ricky Tan in Rush Hour 2. His character is cold, calculating, and ruthless, which makes him quite intimidating. Throughout his performance, he manages to bring out these negative traits of Ricky Tan's personality without coming across as over-the-top or cheesy. I find this balance particularly impressive because it shows how Elizondo is able to create a character that's both menacing and chilling, which adds an interesting layer to the film overall.
Well, Tom, as we've discussed earlier, Rush Hour 2 has had significant impact on pop culture and filmmaking alike. One aspect of its legacy is the influence it has had on other films and television series that followed in its wake. One such example is the fast cop dynamic between characters played by Vin Diesel and Paul Walker. The films also share Rush Hour 2's penchant for over-the-top action sequences and humor, often blending them seamlessly within the same scene.
That's an interesting comparison, Timothy. Another film franchise that was heavily influenced by Rush Hour 2 is the Lego movie series, which features a similar mix of comedy and action. These films often rely on witty humor and self-referential jokes to keep audiences engaged while delivering thrilling action sequences using animated Lego bricks. In fact, one could argue that the success of Rush Hour 2 paved the way for these types of hybrid blockbusters that combine various genres into a single entertainment package.
Speaking of which, Tom, have you seen any movies or TV shows lately that reminded you of Rush Hour 2? I recently watched an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where Jake Peralta and Amy Santiago go undercover at a fancy restaurant to investigate some shady dealings. And I couldn't help but notice how similar it felt to the casino scene in Rush Hour 2.
Yes, Timothy, I actually just finished watching season 2 of Lucifer on Netflix, which features an episode titled The Cinnamon that has some striking similarities to Rush Hour 2 as well. In this episode, the protagonists investigate a series of murders connected to a high-stakes poker game run by a crime boss played by Dennis Haysbert. The episode not only features an action-packed finale, but also includes several humorous moments that call back to Rush Hour 2's balance between comedy and action.
That sounds like an interesting show, Tom. Now that we've discussed the impact of Rush Hour 2 on other films and television series, do you think there are any elements from these subsequent productions that could be incorporated into future installments of the buddy cop genre? I mean, with the success of shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Lucifer, it seems like audiences are still hungry for more lighthearted takes on crime-fighting duos.
While I think it's important to preserve the classic buddy cop formula that made Rush Hour 2 so successful, there's no harm in updating it for modern audiences. For instance, incorporating more diverse characters and storylines could help broaden the franchise's appeal while still delivering the action-packed comedy that fans have come to expect. Additionally, introducing new technologies or crime-fighting techniques could make for an interesting twist on the classic formula without straying too far from its roots.
I couldn't agree more, Tom. In conclusion, it's clear that Rush Hour 2 has left a lasting impact on pop culture and filmmaking alike. Its influence can be seen in numerous films, TV series such as The Fast and even the Lego movie series. While it may not be everyone's cup of tea, there's no denying that Rush Hour 2 has earned its place in history. So here's hoping for a fourth installment in the future.
I think we can all agree that Rush Hour 2 is a classic buddy cop film that successfully blends action, comedy, and cultural nuances to create an engaging and entertaining viewing experience. The chemistry between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker is undeniable, and the supporting cast does an excellent job rounding out this already fantastic ensemble.
Indeed, Tom. Rush Hour 2 is a testament to what can be achieved when you combine talented actors with a skilled director and crew who are willing to push boundaries while staying true to their source material. It's a film that manages to entertain on multiple levels, appealing not only to fans of action or comedy, but also those who appreciate a crafted story filled with memorable characters and thrilling set pieces.
So, what did everyone think about our discussion today? Do you have any thoughts or opinions on Rush Hour 2 that we didn't cover in our conversation? We'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. Until next time, folks, this has been a special discussion about Rush Hour 2.